Hello and welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. This is the weekend, Sean, the weekend of Baltimore Regionals, the first big regional of the new season. How are you doing?
I'm good. I still did not get to play in any pre-release events, but I think, Jake, you showed off some of your wild and crazy pre-release deck builds. People in the Discord also shared off some of their
I
builds. Was it a good one? Was
I
it a
played
good
in
pre-release format, you think?
I think it was a pretty all right pre-release format. I think they really thought about the kits. I feel like there was some good pairs. I think Drifblim, I think, is a pretty good pre-release card. The Drifblim and Drifloon line, mostly because they're low energy attackers,
Yeah.
right? Low energy, they only cost one, and it's like it's not that hard to evolve into it. So like you kind of get away from like that consistency issue that I feel like a lot of pre-releases had. And I mean, I was having Drifblims attacking turn 2 consistently across like multiple pre-releases.
That's awesome.
And then especially with Fan Rotom, right? Fan Rotom, I believe if you got Fan Rotom, you also got Bouflin as your like quote unquote evolution line, right? Some 7 or 8 Pokemon because of that. The best combo, in my opinion, Rotom to start, get out 2 Boufalins, right? Not 3, just 2, and then put the rest of the 3 bench spaces as Drifloon.
All right.
The Rotom, and then like if you pull any stadiums, even if you pull Area 0, Underpath, whatever, you put it in the deck, even if you don't have any Terra Pokemon, because then you get a stadium out more times than not. You do damage with Rotom. You put pressure on Rotom. People have to do 130 to knock you out. And then if you get a Bravery Charm on it, your Rotom's definitely taking 2 hits at least.
Dang. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, seems like you had a good pre-release format though, and one of the people in our Discord actually asked the question about this. I think this always surprises people. Every format I mention this, so I wanted to call it out that you can play more than 4 copies of
Yes.
any given card in pre-release. Yeah, like it's in the rules for pre-release. It's just like if you pull, if you happen to pull more than 4, throw them in. So, and I noticed your deck had a ton of the balloons.
Yeah, and one of the 2 pre-releases that I had, I ran a 5 Drifloons and 6 Drifblims in my deck. Just ultra consistency, Drifloon, that's what I called it. Max consistency explosions.
Yep.
But I mean, yeah, that's the kind of thing, because pre-releases are restricted to anything that you open, and that's pretty much the only restriction.
Yeah.
Outside of following the normal rules of like energy cost and evolution requirements. So yeah, that's something for people that they can think about in the future, in the next one. Or if you have another Stellar Crown, I don't know if people are still going to be having Stellar Crown pre-releases, because boxes and product are starting to release this week. But
Yeah.
for the future, for anyone who wants to know, make sure to do that. But my polls, for the most part, were doo-doo. But I will say that Lacey was the best card in this pre-release, because as soon as your opponent took 1 prize card, you were shuffling and drawing 8.
Oh, that's
Lacey
so
was the
good.
best card by far.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you feel like Lacey? So is it you can play Lacey if your opponent took a prize on the last turn?
No, it's if your opponent has 3 prizes or less remaining.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, actually,
So
in this format.
in a pre-release, for anyone who doesn't know, you're taking 4 prizes in a game. And so in that game, as soon as they take 1 knockout, you are going in sorry, I've lost my
drawing
train of
8.
thought.
There's a cat on the screen for all the listeners as to why Jake sounds like he's having a minor stroke. There's a cat on the screen right now distracting.
Yeah, so they take 1 knockout and they're at 3 prizes. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, no, that's actually kind of perfect for this format, which is a good shout out. But yeah, no, unfortunately I did not get to go to any pre-release events for this one. I think it's the first time I've missed pre-release for any set in like few years. So it felt
Really?
weird. It felt very weird, Jake, to
Yeah,
not make it out.
I did not have great hit rates at all in
Yeah.
this in my 2 pre-releases, and I even got extra packs on top of like the regular packs that you do. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that I think you missed anything.
Yeah,
But
I
I know
mean,
that there's plenty of good hits with like Terapagos and Galvantulas and stuff like that you can get. So
yeah, and I know that that's also something we'll be talking about probably starting next week, maybe the week after. Pretty soon, we'll start talking about a lot of Stellar Crown stuff once that is on TCG Alive, once it's legal to play in Standard, all that stuff. But
mhm.
um, but this week we have just a quick news update, and then we're gonna dive into Baltimore regionals, which is coming up this weekend from when we're recording this, which is still in the Shrouded Fable format. It's kind of hard to
Yep.
imagine. You had Worlds, and then you had nothing for a month, and then a whole new set released, and then there's a regional still. Oh wait, what? We're still playing Worlds format? What? Huh? So
It'll be it'll be weird because it's like that kind of gray area. Everybody just wants to play Stellar Crown, but I think it'll be really interesting because of we only had that one Worlds format
yep.
and then it was gone after that. So how do people respond to Worlds to really like sign off on this format? I think is going to be super interesting.
But real quick before we jump into that, we talked about the Terapagos Ultra Premium Collection. I can't remember if that was last week or maybe a few weeks back when it got announced, but we talked
It
about
was
it at some
weird. You were
point.
moving, you know.
Yeah. We talked about it at some point, not too far in the past. And we do have an update on the promos that will be a part of the collection. And the 3 cards are going to be Cinderace EX, Lapras EX, and Terapagos EX, the collection's namesake. No surprise there. But Jake, you noticed something kind of strange for this little collection here. What about this little set of 3 is making you scratch your head?
So there's the 3, right? The Cinderace, Lapras, and Terapagos. And in the Pokebeach article, you've got, these full arts there. They look nice, cool. But in the product image that we see them in the container, right? The card container that it comes in. Remember, it comes with packs, deck, uh, uh, dice. That's the word that starts with D that I'm looking for. Dice, coin, mat, stuff like that. It also comes with this 3 card holder container, and we kind of discussed maybe what were the possibilities that were going to be in this, and here they are. But in the picture, there's 2 gold and 1 just like regular looking full art. Now, who
Yeah.
knows? Do we know if the Terapagos, which is the non-gold one, do we know if that or any of the others are going to be like metal or a different material or anything like that?
I don't think that I assume they're going to be normal cards. The reason I say that is because these sort of card holders that I believe it's Ultra Pro makes,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that they are designed to hold normal cards, especially card thickness. Again, for those of you who don't normally buy like one touch type protectors, those actually have a specified card thickness usually. So like 0.35 or 0.25 or whatever. So like baseball cards are a little thicker usually than Pokemon cards. So the fact that they're showing them in that little case makes me assume that they're not metal, that they're just the normal promos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my assumption.
It's my reminder that I said the other week when we talked about this that like if you just want the playmat, don't worry. Just wait until they go out on eBay, right? Everybody just starts putting them on eBay and then you go get your playmat for like 20 bucks.
Yeah.
15, 20 bucks max.
I mean, I will say we will have to wait and see how good any of these cards are individually because as a slate of promos, obviously there's a ton of hype for Terapagos. I think that Lapras is kind of a weird one. I feel like some people were a little hyped initially, but I don't really know if if Lapras is going to see a ton of play. But the
I think it's the worst
Cinderace,
of the 3.
oh yes, yeah. But the Cinderace is a surprising, I think, dark horse from the set in terms of like all of the attention is on Terapagos, it's on Area Zero, it's on these like, all these new shiny things. And yet here's Cinderace just casually doing 280 damage for, you know, 3 energy in a format where we have Magma Basin, in a format where we have Charizard EX, right? Like this doesn't, I don't think the cards are going to be worth all that much. I'm not saying that, this is a reason for you to spend 120, 140, wherever, whatever. But I think weirdly, this set of promos, these 3 different cards, are actually a little stacked compared to other ultra premium collections. Like in terms of like getting multiple cards that are really good. Because I think otherwise you've gotten like one card, like one Mew EX, which is
Well,
great.
I think it's the Mew EX, the Mew 151 Premium Collection one. That was the Mew EX, right? The alternate art.
Yeah.
That was a Mewtwo alternate art
Yeah.
in there. I think like a character rare, and then I think it
It
was
was a gold card, like a hard
gold
metal card.
And then in the first one, the Charizard one. Oh, and there was the Arceus one too.
Yeah.
The Charizard one, you had, I think it was like a Charizard VMAX,
The Charizard
right?
V-Star.
You had Charizard V Star. You're probably right on that, actually.
Yeah.
And then like I think like the 2 metal Pikachu and base set Charizards. They were like metal cards of
Interesting.
the old like base sets, I believe.
I don't remember
I could be
specifically.
wrong on this. I'm just thinking this off the top of my head.
But like, I mean, I don't like the art on these as much because the other ones, to your point, like the Mew and the Charizard one especially, were alternate arts, whereas these are they're technically alternate arts, but they're not actually like art. Do you know what I mean? Like they are a shiny version of the existing card. So like they have like a pattern that they always go after, but it's not like the character rare style arts or the SIR style arts that we've grown accustomed to. So
I think that's mostly because of the cards that they chose, right? They chose the Terra. They chose the
yeah,
Stellar Terra types, which are restricting, in my opinion, in what you can kind of do with it in itself. Because none of the Terras have like actual alternate arts, right? All Terra Pokemon. Well, some of them do,
Charizard
I guess, with
EX.
Charizard.
Yeah,
But do any others outside of Charizard?
I don't know off the top. It'd be hard. I think you're right. Most of them have this sort of look and feel.
Yeah.
And the Charizard one, I would even say for that one, it is different, but it's still pretty well. Isn't the Greninja EX from the recent set?
Oh,
It's a
the
Terra
Greninja
type?
has one too. Never mind. Yeah,
No, but I mean, they don't follow the same pattern as like the really beautiful SIR styles that we've seen
yeah.
from non-Terra.
And like VMAXs did at one point.
Yeah.
I feel like we had so many VMAX alternate arts.
Yeah, like the Eevees are the ones that come to mind for me, the evolutions.
Mm-hmm.
But anywho, that's a quick update. A little weird that 2 of the cards are gold, but to me, what that suggests is that they're sort of holding the gold Terapagos probably for. It might be in the like high class pack that Japan always does every year. That wouldn't surprise me if they're holding a gold version for something like that. So
Yeah, I mean they've had gold in those in years past, and then they had the tag teams in there.
yep,
For one of
exactly.
the sets that we eventually got as promos. So
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe that's just what it is, but it's just a little strange that this is the release situation. But anyways, Jake, do you want to get into Baltimore regionals now? Get away from the news.
sure, Baltimore Regionals coming in this weekend. It's going to be, as we mentioned, the last Shrouded Fabled format. And we've got a quick little peek at a graphic. Justin Basil over on Twitter always makes these like rankings graphics, just based on the popularity of them and how well that they're doing in online tournaments. kind of gives people maybe a taste of what the trend is in the meta if they're starting to get invested in evaluating the meta and trying to make different deck decisions, especially before big events. So according to Justin's top decks, these are based on purely results. There's no opinions on this. The results say that Charizard is the number one deck, 15% meta share in terms of the point spread in there, with Ancient Box right behind it with 14 and then 13.2 Reggie Drago V Star. So that first through third actually really tight, Sean. It's only by less than 2% separating these three decks from the top spot. How do you feel about that?
I mean, this seems about right in terms of the top three. Like, if I think, and we'll see some results as well. We're going to also look at the Tournament of Doom.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this seems about right in terms of the top spread. The only thing that I think is off about this list, and this list is purely based on statistics, so it takes best results, but it also combines that with number of people who played the deck. So the
Mm-hmm.
one deck that I think is wildly underrepresented in this type of spreadsheet is going to be Iron Thorns EX, because Quad Thorns is, as you'll see in the results of the tournament, very good at beating several of the decks that are on this list, but it is not a heavily played deck comparatively. So like, it may only see like 10% of the play of all of these other decks, but of that 10%, like if two of those decks make top four, that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the only thing that's kind of off about like this ranking, is that Iron Thorns especially. But I will say, when I see this, it's really interesting to see that almost every deck here, with the exception of Ancient Box, is a two prize deck.
Yes, yes.
And there's no stall. There's no lost box on here at all.
But there's Giratina Lost Box. That's the
It's
closest that we
true.
get.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. We do have Giratina V Star, so you do have some lost box flavor in there if
Mm-hmm.
needed. But yeah, I mean, to your point though, Jake, like I look at this and it does. I think Pokemon has done a pretty good job of pushing everybody into a two prize format, speeding the game up that way, with the exception of Ancient Box.
Yeah, I mean, I Pokemon definitely has done that. They're pretty good at speeding up the game, I feel like, as we've, discussed in the last couple of years. I'm more surprised that Miraidon is not up there. Miraidon, for anyone who is just listening to the podcast, can't see it. Miraidon is number 8 at the very bottom of this list, behind Dragapult EX even. So it's curious to see there after Jesse Parker did so well with it, right? And Tricky Jim, and their whole group being as influential as it is. Miraidon EX not getting as much shine as one would thought, but um, I thought that part was kind of interesting. Only seeing a little bit of it, when I think it could make a little bit more sound presence in Baltimore.
I mean, it might be better in Baltimore than it is showing up on this graphic. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know the number of people who played Miraidon at Worlds. Um, I do think it's surprising that there aren't more people just playing it after its success at Worlds, because you think about it, and if in theory, right, if if Jesse had a different matchup, right, if Jesse had ended up playing against Reggie Drago instead of playing against Iron Thorns, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Miraidon wins Worlds, right? And if
Hmm.
Miraidon wins Worlds, like, maybe that's a completely different story here. So I think that maybe that's another good shout out, which is Miraidon seems to be underappreciated or underplayed based on this chart. The same way that Iron Thorns is underrepresented as well. So yeah, definitely surprising on those two fronts.
I do think that people are very much undervaluing Dusknoir and Night Stretcher, though. I think there's a lot still to be explored with that. I don't think people have tapped into that enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one. I think Dusknoir is just odd because like we were talking about when we talked about Worlds and the speed of the game, right? I think when you get to a speed of the game where all of a sudden you're being asked to give up prizes with Dust Noir, from what I've talked to people about, like giving up prizes with a Dust Noir is not really as beneficial as it may seem on the face of it. Like Charizard can take advantage of it by taking a big knockout when maybe they had to reach. But outside of that, I do think that a lot of decks maybe struggle with, you know, consistently using it, so to speak. I think
Mm-hmm.
the best example is like it's in the Miraidon deck, right? The Dusk Noir line.
No,
What deck was it in? I thought it was in
it's in Charizard. It's in Banette. Um, that's I think pretty much it.
because I thought that Jesse played a Dusk Noir line in the deck for Mimikyu matchups, a Dusclops and a Dusk Noir.
Did he? We might have played just a Dusclops. I don't know about. Well, he probably played a Dusknoir because I don't know if Dusclops makes
Yeah, it's only
sense.
5 damage counters. I thought he played like the 1/1/1 or the one rare candy one. I feel like there was a line somewhere in one of these decks. Anyways,
Nope, not in
no,
his.
interesting. What deck am I thinking of? It was not Charizard. I don't know. Anywho, this is the list though. We can get to the actual results though, if you want.
Mhm.
So looking at the Tournament of Doom, um, top place at the Tournament of Doom is Reggie Drago. I don't think there's any particular surprise. Second, Ancient Box. But then, like I was saying earlier, those Iron Thorns decks at third and fourth. So underrepresented on the chart, but still doing very well against the field. Um, is any of this surprising to you? Is anything standing out? I mean, for you,
I
Jake.
actually don't think. I don't think much of this stands out to me because, especially what we saw with Worlds, right? Reggie Drago taking up like 25% of the room at the World Championships, which is not something that we see often there, especially in a format like this and a brand new deck. It doesn't surprise me to see Drago do pretty decent on here, winning the event, but also getting another placement in top 8. And I mean, kind of really litters the rest of the like top 30,
Yeah.
right? Several different spots in there. Reggie Drago just being a strong deck, fast deck, especially if it gets going and gets that Drago off turn 2. It's really hard to beat, I would say.
Jake, you also asked me last week if I thought Ancient Box was the real deal.
Yeah.
And as you can see on here, like I think Worlds, there was a Roaring Moon deck, but a lot of people didn't play Ancient Box. But if you look at this, you got Ancient Box in second, Ancient Box in seventh, Ancient Box in 12th and 13th. So, a significant amount of Ancient Box as well in those top 15, top 20 spots.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing a lot of Reggie Drago. You're actually seeing a lot of Ancient Box. And then I think it's really just, a toss-up between Charizards, Lugias, and Ogrepons after that, for the most part.
Yeah, I think especially against something like Dragapult, right? Dragapult, the reason that one prize decks aren't really the thing right now is because of decks like that spread those damage counters, right? That are able to take out like all these baby Pokemon and stuff like that. But I think especially with Roaring Moon, right? You have a baseline of HP at 140, and that doesn't even count the ancient booster energy capsules,
Yep.
right? That give it an extra 60 HP to make it a whopping 200, right? It's really hard to knock out multiple prizes of the Ancient Box and Roaring Moon. So I think that's a big reason why it strides. It really just makes a favorable prize trade in that respect.
I wanted to switch over to the meta game because I do think that
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about it, right? And I was like, okay, well, we could look at just deck lists and things like that, but I don't think the deck lists are particularly different from Worlds. Like, we can look at one or
Mm-hmm.
two, but I want to take a look at specifically Ancient Box to start of like, okay, well, what is its matchup spread? Why are people talking about Ancient Box being this top tier deck in the format? So when you click here, this is a great thing about Limitless, by the way. For all of you listeners who haven't encountered this before, you can go to Metagame and you can actually see the matchups for an archetype for the whole tournament, right? So there were Ancient Box, there were 80 total wins and 69 losses for Ancient Box. So 53% win rate, which is like,
It's respectable.
it's fine. Yeah, it's like it's a good win rate, over 50%. But the thing that you see up here, Jake, at the very top, the reason that I think people are leaning into Ancient Box is that the other deck, the deck that won Worlds, the deck that does really well against the rest of the format, Iron Thorns, Ancient Box was 5-0 against
And
Iron Thorns.
this is definitely not surprising. Ancient Box doesn't have any abilities at all, especially rule box abilities that it really worries about in the deck that Iron Thorns really just shuts down, right? The deck is built around shutting down. And especially when Iron Thorns, like I mentioned, that 130 or I mean 140, that Iron Thorns can hit if it has that energy capsule future booster thingy. That doesn't matter when your roaring moons are at 200, right? So
Yeah.
with no way to get any extra damage outside of 140, 160 is your max that you're hitting, it's no surprise to me that roaring moon ancient box has a 100% win rate 5-0 from the tournament of doom. But yeah, other than that, some other good matchups that it had in this tournament, you've got decks like Chin Pao, right? It's got a 4-1 record over Chin Pao. Again, that high HP, taking multiple knockouts with your ninja doesn't really work in that situation. I would say 14-5 against Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn, which is something that I think a lot of people would love to take note because I think Raging Bolt is a good deck now, and preview for the next format, the Stellar Crown format, I think is a good pick in Stellar Crown format. I think Raging Bolt's a really good deck. I don't think enough people are talking about it, but yeah, those are kind of, it's like, in my opinion, it's two highlighted matchups. Like if you're going to play Roaring Moon, you beat Iron Thorns and you beat Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn.
Yep. And then in terms of Reggie Drago, to your point about like its HP being just a little too high for some
Mm-hmm.
of Reggie Drago's like, Kieran plays or whatever. Um, it's just a little awkward, but like, you have an even matchup, at least for this tournament. I don't know if you had a larger sample size, how it would net out, but generally speaking, I'd say like it's about even. So if you're even into one of the most popular decks in the format, that feels pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree.
and then it's Charizard. Where's Charizard on here? Charizard Pidgeot. Yeah, also about even. 5 and 6. I mean, 11 matches as a sample size is very small, so I would also call that roughly even. So if you're even into the two other most popular decks in the format, then your question really becomes what's your bad matchup? And I think it's pretty obvious here, Jake. Lugia Archeops. So Lugia,
Mm-hmm.
at least in this tournament, 1-8. So I guess if you're Ancient Box, the last thing you want to see is a Lugia in front of you.
Yeah, I think, when you talk about Charizard, at least, Charizard, I think that HP is just way too high for Ancient Box, right? You're going to have to potentially three-shot Charizards, which you absolutely do not want to do, especially if they're playing like
Yep.
a Hero's Cape version, right? They just don't put any liabilities on the bench, and you either try to boss up one prize trade, which you'll eventually lose, or you just cannot keep up. But with the Lugia, yeah, just constantly being able to string in energies, right? Being able to attack with multiple different options in there and even rotate some effectively because of the use of stuff like jet energy, right? Jet energy probably hugely influential because I think usually Ancient Box only has for gusting options is maybe a prime catcher and then like Pokemon catchers, right? No bosses or anything like that because you have to play Sada every turn. You need to play the Explorer's Guidance or whatever that guy's name is in there to fill up your ancient spots. So Pokemon catcher's usually the move. So a lot of times if you can retreat something, it's safe for a while in the game.
Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight some of these matchups because I think, a lot of people, I think we're going to see a lot of Ancient Box at Baltimore. And a lot of people are going to be wondering what its good matchups are, what its bad matchups are, because I don't think it's immediately obvious with Ancient Box. I said this last week, I think Ancient Box's worst matchup is itself, meaning its worst matchup is its inconsistency at times to have enough energy on the board. Because if you
Hmm.
just have your one Pokemon that's powered up get knocked out and you don't have a Sada turn afterwards, or like a Dark Patch switch option, you can't do anything. You're just stuck. And the second you whiff a turn, your whole prize trade, benefit goes away. But so that's one of the decks. The other deck I also wanted to see the matchup spread for, which we could take a look at, is the Iron Thorns deck. Because I think Iron Thorns. Now, granted, there were only 7 Iron Thorns players in this tournament. So pretty small sample size here.
It's
But
not going to be a populist deck.
no, but I do think it's interesting to be like, okay, well, it won Worlds, right? Like it got top 4, it got 2 of the top 4s in this tournament. What's going on here, right? So he'll look at this one, and a lot of really high win percentages here for
Hmm.
Iron Thorns, Jake. I mean, Charizard, you got 4-0 at least in this tournament. Raging Bolt 4-0, Miraidon 2-0. It just feels like the most popular decks. Lugia Archeops 7-1-1.
And
Um,
think about this. What is the commonality between all of those decks, all those 3 decks that you just mentioned? They're all rule box Pokemon decks
with
that
abilities.
rely on abilities. So
Yeah.
if you can shut those abilities down, you can get those going. Iron Thorns is pretty all right. It's not a bad deck.
No, no, and I think you just sit here and you just take those L's right to Ancient Box, and you take the losses. Weirdly enough, so Reggie Drago, it was 5-7-1. Again, small sample size. It could very much swing. Maybe it's more even than that, but I do think that Reggie Drago, generally speaking, probably has a slightly better matchup because you have other options, right? You have Dragapult where you can do 200 onto one, set up some damage on the other, and then in theory, like they're not knocking you out in response. You just gust the one on the bench up on the following turn, and then take 4
Hmm.
prizes all in one turn. And if you can do that,
Exactly.
and you can knock out, 2 Iron Thorns, get rid of all of that energy that's on the board. That's really Iron Thorns. Like, if it doesn't have a way to like retreat and attack and penny and all of that stuff, they're in a bad spot. So
And even retreating can be futile when you talk about Reggie Drago, right? Because
yeah,
of Trifrost Curum, right?
yep.
Being able to, with no bench protection, because you're literally just running 4 Iron Thorns, and that's all the Pokemon, no Manaphy's or anything like that. They're not Terra Pokemon, right? They don't have bench barrier on themselves. You could take all 6 prizes in one turn.
Yeah. No, and you're giving up so many cards usually to Reggie Drago with all your
Mhm.
mulligans. So Reggie Drago probably is having a much easier time finding all of its pieces to discard and get its attacks online. So the only downside for Reggie Drago is really, it might take you an extra turn to power up because you don't have access to your teal mask. Okay. I mean, like that's annoying, but like manageable, right? You can get around that.
Yeah,
So
just put it on the bench, put an Ogerpon up front. They're not knocking out the Ogerpon on their first swing. And yeah, just do a little bit of waiting. Be patient.
yeah. So yeah, I just 2 interesting things. But Jake, is there anything that you wanted to point out specifically? Like anything that you want to take a look at?
I don't think it's surprising. I think we mentioned this that Iron Thorns 7-1 against Lugia, being able to actually one shot that deck, I think is not surprising to anybody.
Yeah.
Actually, when we talk about the different decks, but
Yeah. Well, also, like if Lugia can't do its ability to bring Archeops out, like that's pretty rough.
mhm,
like,
yeah.
Lugia needs to find its Flutter Mane to throw it in the active to turn off the Iron Thorns or whatever. So possible, but definitely annoying for Lugia.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about other decks like Raging Bolt. I think Raging Bolt still really good, just really consistent. right? When you talk about, Ogerpon doing Ogerpon things and then having stuff like Sada's Vitality to consistently fill up the hand size has decent matchups. You talk about any Lost Box decks that come in, really good win rate against that Turbo Roaring Moon, right? 6-1 against what's called Turbo Roaring Moon.
Yep.
So not the Ancient Box, I think a separate deck than what we
I think
discussed,
the
but
EX one.
yeah, it's mainly like a Turbo Dark build, and the main attacker is Roaring Moon, and then Dragapult EX if Dragapult continuously comes back up, even though I think it's the worst way to play Dragapult EX right now. Um, Good win rate into that as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see these decks because I think that for me, the fulcrum point, the pivotal point for Baltimore, is going to end up being how popular is Ancient Box, because
Hmm.
I think Ancient Box is, how we said in for Worlds we were like, Stall in theory should be in a really good spot, but Stall's ability to be good is going to be determined by how much Lugia is being played. We saw in tournament results leading up to Worlds that like the more Lugia a format has, the worse Stall does because of things like Jet Energy. Um,
Yeah.
and now with Peturant, even it's really rough out there for Stall because you can't trap something in the active as easily as you could before. But I think this tournament is going to hinge on how much Ancient Box is played, because if Ancient Box is getting a lot of play, then I think it's going to really take the most popular decks down a peg, because
Hmm.
like you were saying, like Raging Bolt Ogerpon is a really strong deck, which has not like a crazy great matchup into any of these top decks, but like I would say slightly favorable. It doesn't like auto win anything that's like super popular, but it has a favorable matchup in Regidrago because your Pokemon are big and beefy and you're going to be out there attacking first, taking 2 prizes. It has a slightly favorable matchup into Charizard Pidgeot between the fact that you're faster than Charizard and the fact that you can hit for weakness against Charizard. It has a slightly favorable matchup maybe against Lugia. So like if you don't see a lot of Ancient Box, I think the rest of the field, other than Iron Thorns, you're probably going to have a pretty good day against. But boy, howdy, you hit an Ancient Box at 26% win rate, and rough.
I think personally that ancient or not ancient box, Raging Bolt is probably, I would say, the most consistent deck in the format. Just
Yeah,
being able, the one prize beat stick. I mean, I mean, if you're wondering what you should play, I think that's a pretty good option. Like if you're still deciding what to play for Baltimore.
Raging Bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to have a lot of fun too. I will say that, like, in terms of decks that you will enjoy playing, I think Raging Bolt is just a very fun deck because you're going to draw a lot of cards. You are going to probably be able to attack turn one if you go second, or turn two almost every
Hmm.
game. Like, it's very unlikely that a deck like that bricks really hard. And I think in terms of like, if you're going to Baltimore and you're looking to like enjoy yourself, maybe you're not even trying to necessarily win the whole tournament, but like you want to make day two. I think Raging Bolt is a great deck to make day two with, because I think that your lines of play are simpler in my mind. So I think, for anyone out there who's thinking about making day two, I think Raging Bolt is a good choice. And I do think Lugia is a pretty good choice for a day two if you're not trying to win the whole tournament, but you just want a good run. If you get the right matchups, I think Lugia can really pop off, and you can make day two. Your turn one and your turn two plays are pretty straightforward, right? Like get Lugia set up, get
Hmm.
Archeops on board, attack. It's really the mid to late game that I think separates great Lugia players from like average Lugia players, of like which Pokemon do you choose to go in with after you've all set up. But um, Jake, is there any other decks going into Baltimore that are like on your radar?
I've been having a lot of fun with Henry Brand's Bennett Dustnort deck. which is not. It's really weird. I think it's a great deck until everybody knows how to play against it
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and it's not as simple, especially with the Dusknoir in it. It's not as simple as just, you know, putting all your trainer cards out of your hand, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about Ionos, especially when you talk about Dusknoirs, and all the decks in the game right now are so dependent on those items and trainer cards in general, trainer cards just being in a really strong spot. I don't know. You get someone like Henry Brand or any of these other people winning these, cups and stuff like that I keep seeing on the timeline that have gotten into the deck. You get someone that really knows the matchup or the matchups and really knows exactly what they need to do. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Henry Brand just rolled into Baltimore with that deck, that he believes in and ended up doing really well this weekend. I think that's my like hot take. I would say my most unlikely thing that I want to happen or think would happen, but I don't know. I've been having a lot of fun with that deck, and it has a lot of cool moments, especially with item locking, right? Item lock is really good against Charizard and so many different decks. Um, Even stuff like Drago, right? Not being able to use like energy retrievals and energy switches
Yeah.
and things like that. So you can do a lot of damage to a lot of decks, especially because trainers again are so prevalent.
Yeah. I mean, I think Isaiah Bradner was also rocking um, the Bennett deck at Worlds, right?
No, he was
Did he
playing
not?
Reggie Drago, but Bradner
He was
has
playing.
rocked Bennett before.
Okay.
It was a regional. I don't think he won, but I think he got like top 4 or top 8. He was running Garatina V Star with a Bennett
Got it.
line
Oh,
inside of it.
the other Bennett,
Yeah.
the baby Bennett, maybe. But yeah, like,
Well, he
or
was
was it the
running the
EX
baby
two?
Bennett and the item locked Bennett.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
like that pick as a dark horse because, like you were saying, like people are not playing it in these tournaments, in these online
Hmm.
events. I'm not sure exactly why that is because I do think the deck is better than seeing zero play. I agree with
Hmm.
you. So I wonder if it's just maybe the top players are not playing in these online tournaments and maybe they're just holding that
Oh,
deck back.
yes, definitely.
Yeah, they
Yes.
might just be holding the deck back where it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to play in these online tournaments right now. I'm going to go to Baltimore because, again, I think this will be an interesting season too because the new tournament structure where it's like getting a Worlds invite is just in North America top 125 now. I
Hmm.
do think you might have a lot fewer top players actively like sharing, what their picks are, what their lists are before these events because there's a lot more pressure, especially early in the season before you've like sort of solidified that top race. I think there's a lot more pressure on those players to do well early to get off to a good start. And having, a little bit of knowledge, having a little bit of a surprise up your sleeve is, I think, going to be. I don't know. What do you think? I think that's going to be an interesting twist this season with those top players.
Yeah, I think the top 125 is going to make things interesting and something that we've not really seen before,
No.
right? It's going to be a different dynamic in general. I think it's even going to make things like IDing even more interesting, like indirectly, right? When you think about IDing into something like day two, I think we see a lot more players, big time players, maybe like miss out on day two or some of those other key situations because I bet intentional draws go down a little bit. Well,
Well, they did
I
change
don't
the
know. Maybe
points.
at the beginning of the season you see it, but then later in the season to get the more guaranteed points. I don't know. Like it's a super interesting dynamic.
I didn't they change the tournament structure, the point structure of like instead of it being 19 points, now it's 18 points.
That one I don't know. I'd have to look that one up.
I think I
I'm sure the
believe.
casters will say it this weekend.
Yes, I'm sure they will. So keep an eye out. But I believe they changed some tournament point distributions with people saying now that like um, ties are basically meaningless because you need to win six. Like that's what I was hearing was like the new important thing is like you have to win a minimum of 6 matches. Anything less than that, and you're almost guaranteed not to make day 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why I think with the 18 points, you effectively have to go, I think 6-2 or 6-3 now, because
So
going
you have to go
5,
6-3.
yeah, like going 5 in anything, like you'd have to go 5-0, 5-1-3, which is
Mm-hmm.
like nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to go 5-1-3. You're not going to be able to ID your way at 5 wins. So I do think that there's going to be a change if I'm correct about that point allocation now. Which, I actually think is fine. I understand IDs at the top tables to guarantee day 2. Like I don't
No,
hate it,
IDs to
but
guarantee top cut, right? At the top tables.
people do that as well. But I mean, IDs to guarantee day 2 also happen, right? Like, because if you are,
Oh, no, when you said top tables, I thought you meant like just like as the top cut.
oh,
That's
right,
my
right,
bad.
right.
I just misunderstood what you said.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like, in general though, like I don't mind IDs. I think it's part of the strategy, but I think it's obviously going to be a more compelling for players to like play it out. And I think this new
Mm-hmm.
tournament structure probably encourages people just playing it out. So yeah, you might be right though. We might see people who normally would ID their way into day 2 and be happy walking away with like 75 points or like 100 points by making maybe top 64 or top 32. You might see players who would be happy with that because they're like, oh, I just need 600 points or whatever to get to Worlds. Now being like, I can't afford that. Like, but I don't know what top 125 is going to be. But especially early in the season, like trying to really set that bar high so that you have some
Mm-hmm.
buffer.
I also don't know, like in the past, and this is mostly because I've never been a top player. I don't know, like when you talk about the like top 16 races, right, for like stipend and stuff like
Yeah.
that, or maybe the old top races for like auto day twoing,
Yeah.
worlds. Um, I don't know if they had that same mindset as, especially like late in the year when they're like, okay, I just need to guarantee like these 75 and I'll be safe. I don't know if that's still going to be it'll probably still be a thing. I would imagine IDing, just to make day 2, because I feel like a lot of top players don't ID just to make day 2. I feel like they usually just roll the dice and play the game and depend on their skills way more than a coin flip.
Yeah. I guess it depends on, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's weird. It's weird. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you might be right. A lot of players don't necessarily, I don't know, ID into day 2. I have no clue. I mean, it depends on like only so many players are even in the race for those top 16 prizes, right? So if you are like 30th, like you're like unless you win the tournament, you're not going to jump to top 16 for stipends.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're like, yeah, I'm just happy. I'll make day 2. I'll guarantee myself points on the board. Because in a lot of tournaments, if you don't make day 2, you may not get any points. So like, it's all situational, but it'll be interesting to see people playing it out at the last round of a tournament instead of just IDing their way into day 2. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a
just
thought.
like tendencies in general, I'm really curious about how the changes affect that.
But that's it for me. I know another slightly shorter episode, but not a lot of news this week as we go into Baltimore and Stellar Crown on the horizon.
Just really waiting for Stellar Crown at this point, but wanted to give a quick shout out to one of our listeners named Duncan. Duncan, I met at one of the pre-releases here in Las Vegas. Big fan of the podcast. So big shout outs to you, Duncan. Congratulations on your 3-0 as well. Him and I both went 3-0 in the tournament. I think he had a little bit different of a kit than I did. I think he had Drifblim, Ladian, which I think actually might be the best because Ladian gets through my Rotom strategy and also gusts up my little Drifblim. So
Oh no.
little crazy, but anyways, thank you so much for listening to the Metapod podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. We don't win regionals, but we definitely win pre-releases and little things like that. But anyways, glad to talk to you all. Listen to us next week. We'll talk about a little bit about Baltimore results and then go heavy into Stellar Crown. stuff because Stellar Crown format will finally be coming. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you next week.